Thank you. Well, thank you. I am so happy to be here with you this afternoon. I love coming to South Carolina because there are a lot of people here with common sense. And sometimes we don't find that in some other locations. But, you know, they said it was a pretty rough and tumble place. They said it was a rough and tumble place, but I lost 2 teeth since I've been here. You know, this one went out last night, this one went out, but I've also had a chance to see 2 very fine dentists here in South Carolina, so it was very good. Many people have asked me about how is my mother doing, and I appreciate the sentiments. You know, right after my announcement on Monday, I flew down to Texas where she is, and my wife and my 3 sons and their wives. And she's in the terminal stages of Alzheimer's, stopped eating and drinking. But so many people have been praying for her. I met one lady who said she had a group of 2,200 people who were praying for my mother. And for the last 3 days, she's been eating and drinking again, so, you know. So I just want to thank you for all those prayers because they do mean a lot. You know, speaking of my mother, you know, she had probably the greatest influence other than Jesus Christ on my life. And because she refused to be a victim. She had every reason to be a victim. You know, born in a very large family in rural Tennessee, shifted from home to home, never really feeling like she belonged any place, trying to cobble together any kind of education that she could, gaining only as much as a 3rd grade education, getting married at age 13, moving to Detroit with my father, and years later discovering that he was a bigamist, and with her only having limited education, working so hard trying to support myself and my brother. But the interesting thing about her is she absolutely refused to feel sorry for herself. And that was a good thing. The problem is she never felt sorry for us either. So, you know, we could never say anything that would evoke any sympathy. And, you know, she was kind of like that Baltimore mom that you saw on television. Except that I would have never been out there in the first place because I would have known what was coming. But, you know, it does say a lot, though, about the concept of the family. And I think the family is such an important pillar of strength for this country. And it's been under attack for the last few decades, you know. First, they started attacking fathers and the role of fathers so much on television, and in so many situations you don't really need a father. And then the government programs that give, you know, money to women who have babies out of wedlock, and they take the money away if she gets married. You know, these kinds of things are anti-family. And one of the things that I think we have to do is get the people who actually create programs to understand the kinds of programs that work, the kinds of programs that lift people out of poverty, not the kind of program that maintain people in a state of dependency. And, you know, some people criticize me and they say, you want to get rid of all the safety net programs? No, I don't want to get rid of all the safety net programs. But what I do want to do is help us to create an environment where you don't need all the safety net programs. You know, this country that we live in is an amazing country. Think about this. We declared our independence in 1776. In less than 100 years, we were the #1 economic power in the world. Nobody else could do anything like that. And, you know, hundreds and even thousands of years before we came on the scene, people did things the same way. Within 200 years of us coming on the scene, men were walking on the moon. America is an exceptional country. There is no other country in the world like it. Have we made mistakes? Of course we have. Have we learned from the mistakes? Of course we have. And at this stage of the game, we as Americans have got to recognize that our strength lies in our unity. And we have to stop listening to all the purveyors of division who are out there, trying to make us believe that we hate each other and that there's a war on women. There's no war on women. That's ridiculous. And that they really are trying to stoke up this racial stuff, in all of our cities, We are going to have to get beyond that. I was asked by a reporter, why don't you talk about race very often? I said, it's because I'm a neurosurgeon. And she thought that was a weird answer. And I said, you see, when I open someone's head, I'm operating what makes them who they are. The skin, the nose, the hair doesn't make them who they are. It's the brain that makes them who they are. And, at some point, we need to start thinking much deeper, at a much deeper level, not just looking superficially. Anybody can do that. An animal can do that. But we obviously have to be able to analyze things at a much deeper level. The religious wars that they're stoking up. I believe that we are all entitled to have whatever faith we want to have. Our First Amendment guarantees us freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. Freedom of religion. We need to be able to live any way that we want to. But, atheists also have a religion. They won't tell you that they have a religion, but they obviously have a religion. They obviously believe in things that they can't prove, so they have faith. I always find it interesting when they say, you're a scientist, how could you possibly believe in God? I mean, that's so ridiculous. And I remember once I was having an argument in Hollywood with a famous atheist. This is a public debate. And he thought anybody who believed in God was a total idiot. And at the end of the conversation, I said, look, I believe I came from God. You believe you came from a monkey. I tend to agree with you. But the fact of the matter is, what we do need to make sure that we never do in this country is force our beliefs upon someone else. And that needs to go in both directions. So the left doesn't get to force their beliefs on anybody else. And, with the whole gay marriage thing, I get asked that question so much in the press conference just now. That was the predominant question about gay marriage. Why is it so hard for people to understand this? Marriage, in my opinion, is between one man and one woman. That's relatively simple. By the same token, our Constitution guarantees the rights of every single citizen. And we protect the rights of every single citizen. However, everybody is equal. Nobody is more equal than anybody else, and nobody gets special rights to change the rules for everybody else. That's what we must guarantee in our society if we are to remain a free society. Because as soon as we start picking special groups and saying, you get to change everything for everybody else, where does that end? There is no end to that. And that's why our Constitution was written the way that it was written. And we must remember that. And we must be courageous. And it is really going to be up to us. We, the people, have got to learn to think for ourselves. We cannot let other people tell us what we're supposed to think. Because if we listen to the pundits and the political gurus, they will always steer you in a certain direction. But that direction is the direction that we've been going in for decades now. And this is where we've landed. And why would we continue to go in that direction? What we need to do is listen very carefully to what is being said and ask ourselves, is this something that is going to benefit me and my children and my grandchildren and my nation and freedom? And is it something that is going to preserve our Constitution? Or is this something that is going in a very different direction? But we are the ones who make that decision. No one can take that from us unless we fall down on the job. And I do believe that we have the ability to analyze these things deeply. You know, we look, for instance, at the national debt that we are facing. Over $18 trillion. That is ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous. It's so much money. If you tried to pay it back at a rate of $10 million a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, would take you 5,000 years. And we are putting that on the backs of our children and our grandchildren. And it is absurd. And most economists will tell you that it puts a tremendous burden on an economy in terms of expansion once the GDP to debt ratio reaches 90%. Well, we're at 103%. The GDP this year will be smaller than the national debt. It's the first time that's happened since we were in the middle of a war. And there's no end in sight because we have leaders who think that they've scored a victory if the debt doesn't go up as much one quarter as it did the last quarter. You know, that is the wrong criteria altogether. We obviously need to be talking about no debt. We need to be talking about a balanced budget amendment. We need to be talking about term limits, not only for people in Congress, but we need to be talking about term limits for judges too. Because when we put our Constitution in place, you know, the average age of death was 47. And so it really didn't matter if we gave them a lifetime appointment. But now I think it matters quite a bit. And, you know, we obviously need to adjust with the times. You know, you look at Social Security. When we put that in place, the average age of death was 63. Now we're approaching 80. You know, if we don't adjust things, then obviously we wind up behind the 8 ball, and we have to think about that. But getting back to the economy, so many of our problems are linked to a poor economy. This has been a very long recovery, and we're still in the recovery process. Now, some people will tell you, like people in this administration, that things are great. You know, the unemployment rate is down to 5.4%. Everything is humming. We got all these wonderful jobs. And, you know, I think one of the reasons that a lot of people are frustrated and are easily manipulated into rioting and doing kind of things that we saw in Baltimore is because they hear all this stuff about how wonderful things is, but then when they open their eyes and look around, they don't see it. You know, there's been plenty of change, but there's very little hope. And that's what's killing people. That's what's killing people. And so in concentrating on that economy, the most powerful economic engine the world has ever known, we possess it. So how do we get it moving again? Well, first of all, we have the highest corporate tax rates in the developed world. That's an easy one. just cut them back down like everybody else's. That's easy. But here's the cool thing. Here's the cool thing. There's $2 trillion of our money sitting overseas that corporations are not bringing back here because they don't want to face that big taxation. What if we just said, we're giving you a tax holiday for 6 months and let that money come back into our country? That would be a wise move. And that would be a major stimulus, and it wouldn't cost the taxpayers a single dime. And then the other thing we need to do, get rid of all the unnecessary regulations. And I stress the word unnecessary, because as our founder said, if men were angels, no government would be needed. But men are not angels, nor are women. And so obviously we do need some rules and regulations there. But the other thing is we need a reasonable tax structure. You know, our tax code is 80,000 pages long. Nobody could comply with all of that. It's absolutely absurd. So we need to just scrap the whole thing and start over again with something that makes sense, something that is proportional. And when I mean proportional, I make you make $10 billion, you pay $1 billion. You make $10, you pay $1. Same proportion, you get the same rights. You know, you think about that. And some people say, yeah, but it's not fair because, you know, the person who makes only $10, he can't afford to pay any money. He can't afford to pay $1. You know, I had an opportunity to experience virtually every economic level in this country, from the bottom to the top. And I can tell you that a lot of people on the bottom also have pride, okay? And they don't want somebody patting them on the head and saying, no, you can't carry your part of the load. They want to be a part of the American system also, and they don't want to be freeloaders. And what we need to be concentrating on is finding ways to provide ladders so that they can climb out of that situation and realize the American dream. That's really the key for everybody. Lastly, we can't be ashamed of who we are. The Bible says, without a vision, the people perish. As we begin to give away parts of who we are for the sake of political correctness, we won't have a vision. We won't even know who we are. We won't know what we stand for. You know, with the Carson Scholars Fund, which is a national scholars program that my wife and I started, and for those who think that doctors don't know how to do anything, I should say that, you know, 9 out of 10 nonprofits fail. And ours not only didn't fail, but it is active in all 50 states, and the District of Columbia has won multiple national awards, many of them being awards only given to one organization in the country for outstanding performance. So don't believe them. Don't believe them. But, you know, our slogan is think big. Each one of those letters means something special. The T for talent, the H for honesty, the I for insight, the N for nice, the K for knowledge, the B for books, the I for in-depth learning, and the G for God. And some lawyers came along, they said, you can't put it up in a public school because the G stands for God. What a bunch of crap, you know? And so we had a rather vigorous argument, and I suggested that maybe we could resolve it at the level of the Supreme Court, which seemed bold and reckless, but it really wasn't, because I knew the very next week I was going to the Supreme Court to receive the Jefferson Award. So I figured I would ask while I was there, and Justice Sandra Day O'Connor said they were all wet. Of course, that was no violation of the First Amendment. And people who say silly stuff like that, what do they know about our country? Do they realize that our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, talks about certain inalienable rights given to us by our Creator, aka God? Do they realize that the Pledge of Allegiance to that flag says we are one nation under God, that many courtrooms on the wall it says, "In God we trust"? Every coin in our pocket, every bill in our wallet says, "In God we trust." If it's in our founding documents, it's in our pledge, it's in our courts, it's on our money, but we're not supposed to talk about it. What in the world is that? In medicine, we call it schizophrenia. And doesn't that explain a lot of what's going on in our nation today? And we need to make it perfectly clear that it's okay to live by godly principles of loving your fellow man, of caring about your neighbor, of developing your God-given talents to the utmost so that you become valuable to the people around you, of having values and principles that guide your life. And if we do that, not only will we remain a pinnacle nation, but we will truly have one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.